You weren't worried about safety, you were worried about the settlement.
That's not true.
Petition dismissed. No contact with the school or the bank.
The judge didn't slam the file shut. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Judge Victor Harlan sat on the bench with a single sheet of paper in his hand, an email printed in black and white, the school district header at the top, a timestamp in the corner. He read it once, then he read it again, and the second time, he didn't look at the paper. He looked at Robert Morgan. "Mr. Morgan," the judge said, voice calm, "you told this court you filed this petition because you're worried about your grandson's safety." Robert Morgan sat stiff beside his wife, Diane, shoulders squared, hands folded like he was at church. His face was a practiced mix of concern and disappointment, the kind that makes people believe he must be right. "Yes, Your Honor," Robert said. "We're terrified. We just want what's best for Milo." Behind him, a few people in the gallery nodded like they'd already decided. Leah Morgan stood at the other table with her, attorney Dana Klein, palms sweating against the wood. Her son, 6-year-old Milo, was with the court-appointed guardian ad litem in a side room down the hall. Leah hadn't slept. She hadn't eaten. She'd spent the last 2 weeks watching her child become a courtroom topic, and now she watched Judge Harlan hold up the email like it weighed more than the law. "Do you recognize this?" the judge asked. Robert blinked once. "No, Your Honor." Judge Harlan nodded slowly, then turned the paper toward the courtroom monitor. A sentence was highlighted, a simple line written by a school counselor 3 months earlier. Grandmother Diane Morgan requested confirmation of the custodial account balance and asked whether the school could provide a letter supporting a petition for conservatorship due to funds being mismanaged. The courtroom went quiet in a way that made every breath feel loud. Diane's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Robert's jaw tightened. Judge Harlan's eyes didn't move. "So," he said evenly, "before you filed any report about alleged neglect, before you asked for emergency custody, before you claimed you were afraid for Milo's safety, you were contacting the school about a custodial account." Robert's voice came out sharper than he intended. "That's not what this is about," he said. Judge Harlan tilted his head slightly. "Then why," he asked, "does the next email show you asking a bank officer whether obtaining temporary guardianship would allow you to move the settlement funds into a family-controlled trust?" Dana Klein slid another exhibit forward, an email chain with a bank representative and a financial advisor. The words were clean, polite, and devastating. "Judge," Dana said calmly, "we're asking the court to recognize what this really is, a custody petition being used as a key to a bank account." Robert's attorney stood quickly. "Objection!" Judge Harlan raised a hand without looking up. "No," he said. The word landed with finality. Judge Harlan set the papers down and leaned forward. "I'm going to be very clear," he said, voice still calm, "because this is family court and people like to hide behind best interests when they mean best leverage." Robert's eyes flashed. Judge Harlan continued, "Your petition alleges immediate danger, yet the evidence shows repeated concern about money, specifically the wrongful death settlement funds held for this child. This court will not remove a child from a fit parent based on a pretext." Leah's chest tightened. Judge Harlan looked at Robert and Diane again. "I am denying your emergency petition," he said. "I am dismissing the custody request for failure to establish unfitness or extraordinary circumstances." Diane's face drained of color. "And," the judge added, voice sharpening for the first time, I'm granting Ms. Morgan's request for a protective order prohibiting you from contacting the child's school, medical providers, or any financial institution regarding the child's accounts." Robert started to speak. Judge Harlan lifted a finger. "Do not interrupt me," he said. The courtroom froze. "If you file another petition with knowingly false or misleading allegations," Judge Harlan continued, "I will consider sanctions for bad faith litigation. If you contact financial institutions again to obtain access to these funds, I will refer the matter for investigation." He paused, then the final blow. "Mr. and Mrs. Morgan," he said, "a child is not a financial instrument, and this court is done entertaining this." The gavel cracked once, clean, final. Leah didn't cry right away. She just stood there, hands trembling, as the room shifted around her like the world was returning to normal speed. Because for the first time since this began, someone had said out loud what she'd been screaming inside her own head. They weren't trying to take Milo because they feared for him. They were trying to take Milo because they wanted what belonged to him. And if you're wondering how a grandparent custody case becomes a money case, how a family war can be fueled by a real reason nobody admits until a judge forces it into the light, you have to rewind to the day Leah first learned that grief can turn into entitlement. Leah Morgan didn't plan to become a single parent. She planned the normal life: marriage, work, kids, maybe a dog, maybe a second kid if life stayed kind. She met Ethan Morgan at 24 when she was finishing nursing school, and he was starting a job with a municipal water department. He wasn't flashy, he was steady, the kind of man who drove the speed limit even when no one was watching. He brought her coffee on long study nights. He sat with her mother when her mother got sick. He, Kantz, proposed on a rainy evening in their small apartment, ring shaking in his hand, voice cracking when he asked. Leah said yes without hesitation. They married 2 years later, and when Milo was born, Ethan cried so hard the nurse laughed gently and said, "It's okay, Dad." Ethan was a good father, not perfect, but present. He was the guy who learned how to swaddle by practicing on a pillow. The guy who built the crib twice because he didn't trust the first assembly. The guy who rocked Milo at 2 a.m. so Leah could sleep after a double shift. And Ethan's parents, Robert and Diane, seemed like the kind of grandparents people envy. They brought casseroles. They bought little outfits. They called Milo our miracle. They posted photos online with captions about family and blessings. For a while it felt safe. Then Ethan died, not slowly, not with warning. A drunk driver crossed a center line on a wet road, and Ethan's truck never made it home. Leah got the call while she was on shift. She remembers the exact second her knees stopped working. The fluorescent hallway, the smell of hospital soap, a co-worker's hand on her shoulder, the world going muffled. Milo was 3. He didn't understand death. He understood absence. He stood by the window for days, asking when Daddy would come back. Leah held him and whispered answers her own mind couldn't accept. "He loved you," she said. "He's still with us," she said. "He's not coming back," she said, eventually, when soft lies stopped working. Robert and Diane stepped in immediately. At first, it felt like support. They offered to watch Milo so Leah could work. They paid for groceries. They handled paperwork. They called lawyers. They told Leah, "We'll take care of you." And in those early weeks, Leah needed care. She couldn't even remember to eat. She couldn't even drive without crying, so she let them help. That's what grief does. It makes you accept hands you might have questioned in normal times. The wrongful death claim took months. The insurance, the settlement negotiations, the court approval. At the end, the settlement was structured partly for Milo, money earmarked for his future, held in a custodial account with Leah as the custodian. Leah didn't see it as a jackpot. She saw it as a cruel substitute. No amount could replace Ethan, but the money could do something important. It could keep Milo stable. It could pay for school. It could keep them in their home. It could fund therapy. It could protect Milo's future from becoming another casualty. Leah set up the account carefully. She didn't touch it unless it was for Milo. She documented everything because she knew the world assumes a young widow will go wild with money. She didn't. She worked, she parented, she grieved, and slowly she began to rebuild. That's when Robert and Diane's support started to change shape. It stopped feeling like help. It started feeling like ownership. It began with questions that sounded innocent. "How much is in the account now?" Diane asked casually one afternoon, while Milo colored on the floor. Leah hesitated. "It's for Milo," she said. "It's managed." Diane smiled tightly. "Of course," she said. "But we're family, we should know." Leah felt a small chill. "Why?" she asked. Diane's smile stayed, but her eyes hardened slightly. "Because Ethan would want us involved," she said. Ethan. They used Ethan's name like a key. Leah didn't want conflict. She didn't want to fight with the only people who knew her husband as a child, the only people who could tell Milo stories about his dad when Milo got older. So Leah gave small answers. "Enough," she'd say. "It's secure," she'd say. "It's invested," she'd say. But the more she tried to keep boundaries, the more Robert and Diane pushed. Robert began making suggestions that were really instructions. "You should put the money in a family trust," he said. Leah frowned. "Why?" "So it can't be misused," Robert replied. Leah's stomach tightened. "Misused by who?" she asked. Robert smiled without warmth. "People make mistakes," he said. Leah stared at him, understanding too clearly what he meant. Not people, her. Then Robert made the offer that sounded generous but felt like a trap. "I can be the trustee," he said. "I have experience. We'll protect Milo." Leah's voice went cold. "I'm his mother," she said. "I protect him." Robert's expression tightened, as if her motherhood was an argument he found inconvenient. Diane stepped in, softer. "Honey," she said, "we're not saying you're a bad mom. We just don't want you influenced by someone new." Leah's throat tightened. "Someone new," she repeated. She wasn't even dating. But they were already imagining the worst, already building a story where Leah would be reckless, manipulated, irresponsible. It wasn't about Milo. It was about control. And the moment Leah said no, firmly, finally, something shifted. The Morgan grandparents stopped being helpers. They became opponents. A week later, Leah received a text from Diane. "Can you send Milo's school login? We want to check his grades." Leah stared at it. Milo was in kindergarten. His grades were smiley faces and little notes about sharing. Leah replied, "No, I'll send updates, but I'm not sharing logins." Diane responded immediately, "You're shutting us out." Leah's chest tightened. "I'm setting boundaries," Leah typed. Diane's next message was the kind of sentence that sounds polite but feels like a threat. "We can go through the court if you want." Leah's hands went cold. The court. Over a school login. Leah didn't answer. She wanted to believe Diane was venting. She wanted to believe it would cool down. But Robert and Diane weren't cooling down. They were strategizing. The first legal filing arrived like a punch. Leah came home from work to find a thick envelope taped to her door. Inside was a petition for grandparent visitation and emergency temporary custody. Emergency. The word made Leah's stomach flip. They alleged Leah was unstable. They alleged she was frequently absent. They alleged Milo had appeared unkempt at school. They alleged Leah was planning to move out of state and cut off family contact. They hinted at substance abuse without stating it outright. They wrote the kind of accusations that sound plausible if you already want to believe them. Leah read the petition twice, then sat down on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet, breathing shallow. Milo tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy?" he asked, small voice. Are you okay? Leah swallowed hard. I'm okay, she whispered, but she wasn't, because she understood what the petition really was, a weapon, and the target wasn't just her custody, it was her authority, her parenthood, and behind that, behind everything, was the money they couldn't reach. Leah called a lawyer that night. Dana Klein answered, listened, then said the sentence Leah needed. Leah, Dana said, this isn't about safety. This is about leverage, and leverage leaves a trail. Leah swallowed. How do we prove it? Dana's voice sharpened. We make them talk, she said. We make them produce records. We make them answer questions under oath. And we bring in a guardian ad litem for Milo. Courts don't like games when kids are involved. Leah nodded, even though Dana couldn't see it. Milo climbed into her lap and held her face in his hands, like he was trying to keep her together. Leah kissed his forehead. I won't let them take you, she whispered. And in that whisper, Leah realized something. She'd spent months trying to keep peace because she thought conflict would harm Milo. Now she understood that letting Robert and Diane run unchecked would harm him more. So she fought. The emergency hearing was scheduled fast. Family court always moves quickly when someone says, danger. Robert and Diane arrived with their attorney, Thomas Ledger, dressed like they were attending a charity luncheon. They looked like stability. They looked like the kind of grandparents judges like. Leah arrived with Dana, looking exhausted because she was. And the judge, Harlan, listened. Robert testified first. He spoke with calm sorrow. Your Honor, he said, we love our grandson. We've been worried. Leah has been distant. Milo has had bruises. He's been late to school. Leah's chest tightened. Bruises? Late? Milo was 6. He played on playgrounds. He tripped. He ran. Leah's attorney asked for specifics. Robert offered vague answers. Kids say things, he said. Diane cried softly. We're all Milo has left of Ethan, she said. That line landed in the room like perfume. Sweet, persuasive, heavy. Leah felt her throat tighten. Dana stood and presented school attendance records. Milo had consistent attendance, no pattern of tardiness. Dana presented pediatric records, no concerns for neglect or abuse. Dana presented Leah's work schedule, showing she had arranged childcare. Dana's voice stayed steady. Your Honor, she said, there is no emergency here. Robert's attorney argued it was preventative. The judge did something common in family court. He didn't grant custody, but he granted a temporary visitation schedule for the grandparents pending further review. It wasn't full custody, but it was a foot in the door, a court-sanctioned access point, and Robert and Diane used it immediately. Within weeks, Leah noticed Milo changing, not dramatically, subtly. He started asking questions he'd never asked before. Mummy, why you don't like Nana? He asked one night. Leah froze. Why would you say that? Milo shrugged. Nana said you don't want family, he said. Leah felt heat rise in her chest. That wasn't love, that was narrative shaping. Then Milo said something that made Leah's stomach turn cold. Nana said you spend Daddy's money, he whispered one night like it was a secret. Leah stared at her child. What? She asked gently. Milo's eyes were wide. She said you might take it away, he said. She said they have to protect it. Protect it. Leah's throat tightened. This wasn't just a custody fight. It was indoctrination. They were teaching a 6-year-old that his mother was a threat, and they were teaching him that money was more important than trust. Leah called Dana immediately. Dana's voice sharpened. We're filing for modification and protective restrictions, she said. And we're subpoenaing everything. Everything. Because if Robert and Diane were talking about protecting money to a child, it meant the money was the point. Now they just had to prove it. Discovery cracked the case open. Dana subpoenaed the school. That's where the email thread came from. The one Judge Harlan read in the cold open. A school counselor had documented Diane asking about a custodial account and requesting supporting letters for conservatorship. Dana subpoenaed the bank. That's where the second email came from. Robert asking if temporary guardianship could allow them to move settlement funds into a family-controlled trust. Dana subpoenaed the probate court records, and that's where the real reason became undeniable. Robert and Diane had filed, quietly, an application to be appointed as Milo's conservators, citing concerns about fund management. They had done it while simultaneously claiming their custody petition was about safety. 2 tracks, 1 child, 1 goal, money control. When Dana showed Leah the documents, Leah felt sick, not because she was surprised, because she realized how intentional it had been. They weren't panicking, they were planning. They were building a story about Leah's instability to justify legal access to Milo's money. And once you have custody or guardianship, financial control becomes easier to argue. It's not automatic. But it's a door. Robert and Diane were trying to get the door. Dana didn't waste time. She filed a motion to dismiss their petition for bad faith, requested sanctions, and sought a protective order limiting their contact and prohibiting financial interference. The hearing was scheduled, and this time, the judge had paper, not vibes, not tears, paper. That's how Leah ended up in the courtroom during the cold open. That's how Robert's best interests testimony collided with his emails about moving money. And that's how the judge finally saw the shape of the case. Not a safety case, a financial control case wrapped in grandparent love. Judge Harlan shut it down. He denied custody, he restricted contact, he warned of sanctions, and he drew a line around Milo's accounts. After the ruling, Leah walked into the side room and saw Milo sitting with the guardian ad litem, coloring quietly. Milo looked up. His face changed instantly. "Mommy," he said, standing fast. Leah knelt down and opened her arms. Milo ran into her like he'd been holding himself together by sheer will. Leah hugged him tight, breathing in the smell of crayons and shampoo. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're okay." Milo's voice shook. "Am I in trouble?" he asked. Leah's throat tightened. "No," she said. "Never. Grown-ups were just arguing." Milo pulled back and stared at her. "Nana said, you might go away," he whispered. Leah felt her chest crack. She forced her voice steady. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "And you are not going anywhere." Milo's eyes filled. "Promise?" he asked. Leah nodded. "I promise," she said. "On everything." And for the first time in weeks, Milo's shoulders lowered, not fully, but enough to show how heavy they'd been. The aftermath wasn't clean. It never is. Robert and Diane didn't apologize. They told their friends they were betrayed. They claimed the judge was biased. They claimed Leah turned Milo against them. But the court record didn't support their narrative. The court record supported something else: bad faith, manipulation, a child used as a pathway to money. The guardian ad litem recommended therapy for Milo to untangle adult messaging. Leah agreed immediately. She also changed how she handled the settlement funds, not because she had done anything wrong, but because she wanted no room for future attacks. She filed periodic accountings voluntarily. She created a transparent trail. She locked down access. And she did something else that mattered more than any bank document. She rebuilt Milo's sense of safety. She created routines, dinner at the same time, bedtime stories, Saturday pancakes, little predictable moments that told Milo's nervous system something important. The world is steady again. One evening, weeks after court, Milo asked Leah a question while she tucked him in. Mommy, he whispered, do you miss Daddy? Leah's throat tightened. Yes, she said softly. Every day. Milo stared at the ceiling. Is Daddy mad at you? He asked. Leah's chest ached. No, she said firmly. Daddy loved you. Daddy loved me. Daddy would want us safe. Milo nodded slowly. Then he whispered, Nana said Daddy would want them to have his money. Leah felt heat rise in her chest, but she kept her voice gentle. Daddy would want you taken care of, she said. Money is just a tool. People are what matter. Milo's eyes were sleepy. Am I a tool? He asked, voice small. Leah's heart cracked cleanly. No, she whispered, pulling him close. You are not a tool. You're my baby. Milo's eyes closed, and Leah held him until his breathing slowed, feeling the weight of what adults had almost done. Here's what the case really revealed. Grandparents don't always seek custody because they're villains. Sometimes they seek custody because there is real danger. Sometimes they step in when parents truly cannot. But this case wasn't that. This case was about entitlement disguised as concern. It was about grief turning into ownership. It was about a family believing blood gives them the right to override a mother. And it was about the oldest trick in family court. Use best interests language to get the court's attention. Then use the court's power to get what you really want. Money, control, access. Judge Harlan shut it down because the trail was too clear. Emails, bank questions, conservatorship filings, a child being coached with financial fear. It wasn't subtle once it was gathered together. It was just hidden, and that's the lesson. The real reason doesn't always show itself in the first hearing. It leaks out through paperwork, through messages, through the things people assume will never be read aloud by a judge. So here's the question to sit with. If someone in your life claims they're only worried, what happens when you follow the paper trail? Because feelings can be performed, but documents don't perform. Documents reveal. And in Leah's case, the documents revealed the truth that saved her son from becoming a bargaining chip. Not in a custody war, in a money war. Leah didn't win because she yelled louder. She won because she stayed steady, because she documented, because she listened when her child repeated adult words that didn't belong in a 6-year-old mouth, because she fought with evidence, not emotion. And in the end, the judge didn't just deny the petition. He protected a child from being turned into property. He protected a mother from being erased. And he reminded everyone in that room of something family court sometimes forgets to say out loud. A child is not an inheritance to be claimed. A child is a person to be protected.